Hey, it's Carissa. This is Bad at Keeping Secrets, and today I have Sarah from the Moon Studio talking about moon cycles and lunar magic for everyday life. I think we should start out with what's the difference between moon cycles and astrology?
Yeah, the moon is the moon, just like this plant behind me is a plant. And then what humans will do is they will subscribe meanings onto certain things, creating symbology and creating archetypes. And the the lunar cycles, the moon is astrological, of course, and also it exists on its own, of course. It's its own thing, just as all the planets are their own thing. And when I think just to differentiate, astrology is like how people talk about and give language to these larger energies, these larger archetypes, and these larger and very intimate experiences, right? So humans, by nature, we know this, we are pattern seeking creatures, right? We've had to remember where the poisonous berry is. We will very often need to categorize something. We will categorize something like, or we will even categorize something for what it is not, or what it is very, unlike, right? It's literally the way our brains have evolved. So there's that. How I came to work with the moon is probably how many people have. And that was by understanding there was a connection energetically and physically. And so we know this also scientifically, right? We know that we're made up of approximately, depending on our age, like 50 to 80% water. And we know scientifically that the moon controls the tides and controls or affects, control isn't the right word. I don't actually like that word, but the moon influences all the water on the planet. The moon influences all the water in the earth, right? That's why there's lunar gardening, right? Like there's literally people planting things at certain times and harvesting uh, plants at certain moon phases because of this link between the moon and water. And so we also know then, of course, that the moon is going to affect our ding, ding, ding emotions and also our physical bodies. So there's that aspect. And then through collaborating with the moon and listening to the moon, I started seeing a correspondence, which I talk about in the book that I wrote, and I used to teach this class for many years. I started seeing a correspondence between energetic levels, our physical bodies, and our consciousness levels. And understanding that if we took a theme or we took like a topic, say, let's just say self-love. I want to work with self-love for one lunar cycle. I want to see what is going to happen. As the moon shifts as the moon shifts its orbit, as the moon's light changes, we so can change within our consciousness. So we can explore self-love through a conscious, like a highly conscious level. We can explore self-love through a highly physical level. We can explore self-love through an intuitive level, an action-taking level. And what I find most fruitful through a shadow level and or like subconscious unconscious level, because so much of where transformation takes place is through our subconscious, is through thinking about things in a different way. It's through relating to ourselves and the world in a different way through embodiment and through action. We know that like time plus consistency equals transformation. And so if we run self-love or whatever else, it could be abundance or patience or courage or any other quality or any other thing we would like. I want to write a book. I want to get pregnant. I want to move, whatever it may be. When we run that through a lunar cycle, which is, I feel like the lunar cycle is like, hi, everyone. Hello. I was created to help you see yourself differently and see the world differently. I literally am reflecting the sun's light. I'm literally the lightness in the dark. I literally help make plants grow and animals get pregnant and mate, and like all, and like I feel like it's like I feel like it's hiding in plain sight that this is one of its gifts. It's one of its gifts that it's given to us, and I'm like stumbled upon it because I'm intuitive and I'm a psychic, and I practice magic and ritual and self-reflection. I feel really lucky that I was able to like pattern seek in my own way, right? I talked about pattern seek. I'm like, oh, wait, the lunar cycle isn't just a new or full moon in an astrological sign. It's this larger phase that mirrors the seasons and mirrors a creative process. It mirrors, beginnings, middles, and endings. It's right there for us, and it's so natural, and anyone can immediately begin simply by having a relationship with the moon and a deeper relationship to their interior life, their feelings, their energy levels, what they think, far, far away from what I'm telling you, what someone on the internet is telling you. It's very much a tool for self-reflection, growth, and transformation.
Okay, so I want to go back to a few different things that you said, in no particular order, but I want you kind of early on a little bit talked about how the moon's effect on our physical being and the moon's effect on our emotions. And I was wondering if you could kind of unpack what you mean by both of those statements.
Sure. When think about like water rising to a surface, think about the crest of a wave. What does that feel like? It can feel like exhaustion. It can feel exciting. It can feel intense. And then you can start thinking about what your body feels like. This is the easiest example. What your body feels like around a full moon. Do you remember what your body, or what your child, or if you have a pet, do you kind of know what's going on when the moon is like, when you're about to get your period and you're like, why do I feel like a demon that wants to like, like murder everything? And then you're like, get your period 2 days later and you're like, oh yeah. Do you have that sort of, you're like, why am I so exhausted? And then you're like, oh, it's a full moon tomorrow. Do you have that, or are you more excited? Do you kind of know?
Oh, for me, it's like a real exhaustion, and it makes a lot of sense hearing you talk about this. This is definitely out of my wheelhouse, but I think as a person, I've always really been attracted to the moon. And oftentimes, like, I think if I don't know how long ago I started like blaming the moon for my, I don't know, kind of downward moody or like indescribable, like something is just off and I don't know what it is. And then oftentimes I feel like all the time I'll look up and it's a full moon. Which is, I mean, neither here nor there, but I think always growing up I had understood that like there was a connection between the moon, like the sort of like mysticism, and I don't even know if I'm using that term correctly. There's maybe a romance that I feel like I have sort of with the moon that defies my ability to kind of really understand what it's about, but it's there. And so I think, again, this is another reason why I really wanted to talk to you, because I wanted to understand the allure of the moon and to think about the sort of celestial dance that like we as humans are having with this like grandiose being, that just seems like difficult to kind of define.
Yes, yes, yes. You are absolutely naming something that everyone, I think, can relate to, because everyone has their own specific relationship with the moon, and it feels at once intense and personal and very large and like ancient and like collective,
Oh,
both. And it's, I love that you brought up, the full moon and, blaming it on the moon, because what will often have, I call the full moon like everything at once. You're like, all of the energy is rising, all of our emotions are rising. Things that might have been accumulated energy, thought forms, weird text message exchanges, whatever has kind of accumulated wants to come up. And we know that emotions, like there's that saying, you have to feel it to heal it. Like we know that things coming up aren't bad, but human beings cannot stand to be uncomfortable. So that's often why they'll blame it on the full moon. The full moon is sort of this large, like messenger, this like large trumpet kind of going off in the consciousness saying like, you have to look at this, or like, you haven't been sleeping well, or like, you need to figure out what's going on with this relationship, or, you've been putting off paying your taxes, or like, that's why it's like everything at once. And what we'll often do, because we're humans, we will often like offload it, we'll ignore it. There'll be an outburst, we'll be passive aggressive at someone else. And really the tax stress gets like our like neighbor gets the tax stress when we're like, move your car, we're very avoidant. As we can be avoidant as a species. We're usually just taught to either avoid and ignore or override. We're very, very, very many people, I think it's like, is it nurture? Is it nature? Is it society? Is it white supremacy? Who knows? But I think we can tend to, it can be challenging to look at something head on. It can be challenging to even look at all of our gifts head on. It can be challenging to focus on what is beautiful and what is available to us. We'll often want to undermine it or self-sabotage it, or, especially I think for like women and femmes and queer folks and trans folks, like we're either too much or too little. Like there's no like just right Goldilocks. It's like you're either this, big thing who's really high maintenance, or you're this like little tiny little thing in a box. So we're very binaristic. And I think that the reason why we might be in love with the moon is like, the moon is not a binary. The moon is this spectrum and is this cycle, and it gives us the opportunity to explore different aspects of self, different aspects of consciousness. And it often isn't going to, if we start like collaborating with the moon and hanging out with the moon, AKA our intuition and our bodies, it's not going to let us off the hook. It's like, you're going to have to deal with this, or you're going to have to fix your sleep, or you're going to have to switch your jobs, or whatever it is. And that's why it can be wildly uncomfortable, because we don't like to feel uncomfortable emotions. And while we say we love change, we often like change when it's change we can control.
Exactly.
And life doesn't really happen like that, as we all know.
I don't know how many years I've been trying to like grapple with that lesson of like really liking change, but the change in which I can control. And like so many things there's not very little, I think, in my personal understanding of how the universe works that is actually in my control. Maybe nothing, I don't know. And yet I base all of like my mental well-being on my ability to try to control it. It makes no sense. And yet I still do it. I want to talk about a couple different things. Do people normally ask you to give like a little bit of an overview about the different stages or emotions or physical sort of things that can go along with all of the moon phases?
Well, I definitely wrote a book about it, so folks can absolutely check that out if they are interested and want more detail. The advice that I tell people, because this is literally currently one of my only jobs, which is to point people back to themselves and their own experiences. So I always suggest folks spend a lunar cycle tracking their energy, tracking their intuition, tracking their emotions, and seeing if there's any kind of connection, correlation, reflection to the lunar cycle. Because the other thing is, and this is why I take a bit of pause around certain popular astrology. And when I say that, I mean just like astrology on the internet or on social media, right? Our experiences are so unique. Like people are not a monolith, and we're not going to experience anything in the same way. You might really, really love the new moon time I don't really love new moons. They're pretty exhausting to me. And conversely, and I go into all of that in the book. A lot of it is the phase that you were born under the moon. Some of it can be linked to astrological reasons, like what house your moon is in, what is aspecting your natal moon. There's all of that. It's more complicated. We don't need to make it complicated, but we don't want to make it a monolith. We don't want to bring in shoulds into a spiritual practice. Spiritual practices are not one size fits all, and spirituality is not a self-improvement project. It is not a self-improvement project. It is about accessing the truth, whatever that means for you, and abiding by the truth within your integrity and with humility and with gratitude. But it is not a like, it's the new moon, gotta blah, blah, blah. Oh, I should be feeling like this. Why don't I feel like this? I should do this. Like, that's not what spirituality is on any level. Like, we have to separate in our minds spirituality, mysticism from self-improvement, because what bar is that? Who created that bar? Who created that metric?
This for me is really linked to, I think you talk a lot about intentions in the book. And I feel like, Sarah, there's just like so much that I've already learned and I'm trying to sit with in this, because I definitely conflate self-improvement with spirituality, or the two are very tangled for me in ways that I'm only like shockingly recently trying to work out. But I think for me, it comes back to this like idea of intentions when exploring these things. Is that kind of, or can you talk a little bit about intentionality in the work, in your work?
Yeah, I think I always think of anything big in spirituality is one of my teachers, a rabbi, says there's always at least 3 ways to enter into something, to have a transformation, to experience a miracle, to begin a new project, to think about life. And that is something that comes from the inside, which would be an intention, which would be a dream or a wish or a vision. There's something that comes from external, a problem to solve, or a new opportunity, or a new relationship of some kind. And then there's the third, which is the mix of the two. And that is really like what I think of when I think of divination, and I think of the kind of spirituality that I'm constantly recentering myself around, which is a spirituality of relationship, which is not truly about the self. It can't be, because we're not, like, I have how many like things in my gut, like little creatures in my gut, like how many people help get me here, people I don't even know, people I'll never know. I'm in relationship with people and energies and spirits and animals that I know and that I don't know, right? And I think that's this like interesting paradox of the intimate and the known, and the mysterious and the unknown. And within that also sits like gratitude and awe and trust as well. So I don't know that I answered your question, but I think that why we love intentions is because it's a beautiful North Star. And I think of it as, when you're walking downstairs or on a path and there's the guardrail, it's like and you like run your hand on it and you're like, oh yeah, there it is. Like, there's the path, right? I think intentions can serve as a really beautiful refining device and foundational device where, again, if say we're working on self-love or love, oh yeah, did I talk to my dog with love? Like, if my intention for the day was to be more loving, was I more loving with myself? Like, did I talk to myself with love and kindness? What does that feel like? What does that look like? So I think intentions, that's where we usually begin, right?
I think so. I think it's difficult to, again, for me at least, it's like a practice of being able to have my actions be in alignment with my intentions. And I think that's what maybe you're talking about, being conscious or aware of maybe the disalignment of how actions, how if your goal is to be or your wish is to act with love. Um, what do you think about, so when you think about values and defining values in relationship to intentions, I'm sorry if, again, if like you are like, I don't want to answer that, just don't. But how do you come up with sort of guiding values or intentions, or how do you help people with that?
I think that our intentions have to be aligned with our values, or else they're not alive. I think why so many folks feel conflicted is, well, there's many reasons for that, and I'm not going to get into that, right? We could be here all day, but I think a way to get back into feeling solid and grounded is thinking about your values truly and what those look like, but what they are in action. And oftentimes, because this world is so complicated and because this world is so hard and confusing, that's often where we start to experience the erosion of self-trust. And when I said spirituality is not a self-improvement project, and it's a mechanism of getting to the truth or our truth, it's like we're not hiding anymore. There's no hiding, there's no avoiding, there's no overriding. I think that if our values aren't connected to our intentions and we're not sure what those look like for us, we're going to be really derailed, because many, many people have their own version of the truth. They have their own experience, they have their own biases, and they will not necessarily agree with what your version of a certain value is. Like, even think about love. Nobody agrees on love. We say things about love in our culture. Love is a mess. If you look at rom-coms, if you look at reality TV shows, if you look at, it's all propagated on like white supremacy and property owning and possessiveness. And like, even think about what we were told when we were young of, you have to feel butterflies, or you have to be like crazy. Like, even the words used around love, like, what? I don't want love to make me feel crazy. I don't want to feel like out of control, a crush. I'm crushed. I know, I want to feel expanded. I don't want to fall in love. I want to grow in love. I want to root in love. I don't want to feel like completely hijacked and have my nervous system going off like insanity. But that is what a lot of us were told. That is what love is, and that's not love. I'm sorry, but that's just not love. Even with consent stuff and love and like gender roles and like all of this weird, it's so weird. It's like, I feel like I'm an alien, because I'm like looking at these examples and I'm like, this is really not, everyone's saying it's what this is, but in my experience, that's not how love makes me feel like safe, supported, grounded. I can be vulnerable. I can share. I want to give. Love is also, can I swear?
Absolutely.
Love is also like very fucking confronting, because you have someone who in my relationship is going to say, hey, like, I know you at your best. I've seen you at your best. You are not being your best right now. And you're going to have to reflect on that, because you're not acting at your best, or you're not, and like, if you need help with that, I can help you. But I have a spiritual relationship. Like, we're honest with each other. We're not hiding from each other. We've seen each other at our best. And so because of that, we can say, hey, I, with compassion, with respect, I love you so much. And I think that you can do better because you're acting a little petty, or, you know, or like maybe you need a timeout, you know, or what do you need? Like, what's going on, you know? So that's the other thing. And I think love also in our culture is very much about performance, the performance of, you know? So I'm just using that as an example of, in this mixed up, complex world, if we don't define certain values for ourselves, if we don't name what those are and what those, how those will function for us, particularly in decision making, particularly in like moving forward on more important things that involve other people, we are going to be really taken off the path, because people are going to say, oh no, that's not what justice is. Justice is this. Oh no, kindness looks like this. You're not being that, you know, like, and you're like, well, I don't know. I don't know. I think I was being pretty kind, and no, that's not enough. Or it's, so I think that values is a really great foundational grounding aspect of simply who we are, it's a centering tool that we can use as human beings navigating a very confusing world.
When you introduced yourself as an intuitive psychic, or I think I'm getting the wrong words wrong. But I was wondering, I don't know if I've ever met a psychic.
Well, my
Um,
love, everyone is psychic, so you've met many psychics.
yeah, will you tell me about it?
So for about 7 years, I made my living as a psychic tarot reader.
What does that look like? Sorry.
Um, no, it's, I mean, it's pretty chill. I would sit with people, you know, I'm also a medium, but that's, so what that means is
I want to ask you for both.
so I can talk to, or I can hear or get information from spirit, your guides, my guides, and about like 30% of the time, dead people, like people who've passed over, people's relatives. Um, but it wasn't, that one wasn't like a sure, that wasn't like, oh yeah, you know, so I never advertised that, because sometimes people would step through, but it wasn't like, this is what you're going to get, you know, like I didn't ever want to do that, but that was an aspect of it. So what that looks like is sitting with people and listening to people and holding space for the totality of the person, and holding space for their brilliance and their dreams and their fears, and being given this incredible opportunity to see all of the various ways in which people can use their gifts, their dreams, and even their heartbreaks and hardship as a way to move in their wholeness and on a specific path that would be probably best suited for them at this time. Even I believe in free will, you know, some of it was divinatory, meaning like telling folks the future, and that's in fact how I used to operate in the very beginning. And then people would come back like 6 months later and they'd say, oh, everything you told me came true. Like I would let's like help me out here. Over time, I realized that it was more important to really deal in the present moment, because the present is where we do our work. The present is, you know, what needs to be grappled with and be with. So, but yeah, I would use tarot. I'm a tarot reader and a tarot scholar. I know the tarot very well, and so that would be the predominant tool and modality. And often, as a psychic, it was just receiving information from guides, spirit, the person's intuition, my intuition, and it was meant to like affirm and support, you know, what people were going through. And it was a great honor. And so now I use those skills in channeling. So in the Many Moons Planner, there are monthly overviews and themes that will probably be coming up for many. And I also use it I teach classes now. I really don't see a lot of one-on-one clients anymore, maybe about 3 people a month, if that. But I teach, and that's how I use my gifts in that way. But we all are intuitive, all of us. We all are psychic as well, all of us. There's not one person on the planet who's not. It just was that it was just a little, there was less effort. Let's put it that way. For me, there was just less efforting. Just like how just about everyone could learn how to play the piano. Some people just can sit down and do it really well, and they maybe don't need lessons. Some people might need lessons for a year, or some people might, it might take even longer. I take I'm thinking about, like, I've been taking boxing since like 2021 or something. I really haven't gotten much better. Like, I've gotten like a little better, like a snail, you know what I mean? But some people just hop right in the ring and they're like ready to go. They're natural into, like, they're instinctual, they're strong. So that was just one of my more natural things that I always had, that I didn't even know you could have a job at, to be honest, because I didn't come from, you'll hear all these people saying, like, I come from 17 witches, and like, I was given a tarot deck when I was 2 years old. No, that wasn't, I didn't grow up in that. Like, nobody was like, doing that for me. So I was very, and I had a lot of skepticism about this stuff. Like, I still do. I mean, I still have a lot of skepticism about all of this stuff, and like many people, right? So I'm open, but I'm also, we have to use our discernment, right? Because that's the other thing. It doesn't matter anything I would say or suggest to someone if they didn't agree with it, or it wasn't of like best and highest for them. It's always about using your own discernment and your own intuition in order to make the best decisions for you and what you need, and what your family might need or whatever. So that's what I have to say about that.
Oh no, it's pretty incredible. I want to talk a little bit about, can I ask you a little bit about tarot? And
I'll give you a tarot. You can come on my podcast. I'll give you a tarot reading.
I would love that. Recently, I got my first one that I had ever had, and it was very unsatisfying in the sense that it was exactly on, but the answer was, I just needed to wait. And I think I'm in this moment where I was like, oh, I don't want to wait. I need to move. And
It's annoying like that. Like, it's so annoying. And you're like, I didn't want to get this message. And then you pull like 10 other cards and they're all like, wait, rest, not now. And you're like, come on. Like, no, I want the answer I wanted. Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's wild. I get that all the time too. I'm like, no, really? Pull another card. Really? Pull another card. And then you're like, okay, I need to accept this. Totally get it.
Acceptance is hard. I want to talk a little bit about, like, this kind of reminds me of how you talk in the book a bunch about the importance of creating your own mythologies and rituals. And I feel like that for me is kind of something that I'm lacking in my life. I feel like, going back to what you said about skepticism, I think I sort of exist in this world where I need to be very like critical about everything. And there will be some like mythologies or actions that provide a lot of comfort, but this like analytical part of my brain will override it and not let me take that comfort, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I mean, for me, it's that I don't resonate at all. And like, no offense to anyone listening, if you do resonate, I mean, like, I have billions of people resonate with this. So, like, it's really beautiful. I don't resonate with Greek mythology, like, and that's most people's into mythology or astrology or whatever. It's just like, I like the pictures, like, I'm like, oh yeah,
Art is
Pegasus,
beautiful.
like, yeah, oh my God, I love a Roman statue, like the next person, right? Like, art is incredible. But it's just not like, I was like, what's going on? Zeus turned into a swan and then did something horrible. It just wasn't it's just not my thing. And so I think we have to find, we don't, if folks aren't into mythology, that's fine. For me, tarot was sort of my mythology, because there's all of the histories and all of the stories woven into the deck, because there's so many cards, and it traces a story and a process really of transformation. And there's so many different decks out there now that you can find a deck that's just about anything. It can be completely devoid of humans even, right? It can be animals or colors or shapes. And so you can create your own cosmologies. And I think that with ritual, it's important to play around with rituals that feel supportive and can give you something that's almost languageless, and that shifts, in witchcraft or magic, but I think even in spirituality, a ritual is meant to shift energy. A ritual is meant to give you something, whether it's yourself or a certain feeling, or a sense of relief and release. And like, even for me recently, a really great ritual has been, I've been doing a lot of somatic work, and it's been just like a 15 or 20-minute playlist of going from freeze to fight to like window of tolerance, like putting my body through that cycle. And within that, there's like release, there's grounding, there's connection, there's learning and practice for myself to get out of freeze. Like when I find myself in freeze unconsciously, it's just practice. I'm like, oh, I've already been practicing how to go from like freeze to fight to a period of stasis and flow. And so I think sometimes rituals can be a practice where you're like, I want to get better at being like, so here's another morning ritual I have is when I wake up, if I'm not careful, my mind will just start being a mind, And so I really intentionally, as soon as I come to consciousness, I start thinking intentional thoughts. I start thinking about what I want to experience most of this day. I make sure my body is soft. I do energy work on myself, and then I get up, like before I leave my bed. And it takes me all of 5 minutes. To be honest, some days it takes me longer because I don't like leaving my bed. I want to leave my bed in a state of like softness and openness and intentionality. And honestly, some days it's like a 25 minutes of me, like the mind comes in, worry comes in, anxiety comes in, tightness comes in. These are rituals that need no tools. They are completely born of my intuition. They're definitely helping me practice in life, and they help me to facilitate change. So it doesn't have to be some like big thing. It can be a really big thing with like 17 candles and, burning herbs, and you go gather and forage what you need, and it's on a specific moon phase, and it's like fireworks. And it can be these smaller things, these smaller practices that help bring us back into presence and give us the support that we need in whatever it is we're searching for support around.
Sorry, there's so many things I have to write them all down to be able to recall them. To be able to recall them. I was wondering too, like when you think about this, there's the word that also comes to mind that you talk a bit about in the book is spell casting. And how can we talk a little bit about what, so my conceptions of what a spell are I think probably very antiquated and not in. Talk to me about how you cast spells around the moon and what a spell is. And also if we could kind of bring that out. I know this is a big question. I was wondering if we could kind of go back in time,
Yeah.
and you could define what you mean by magic.
Well, one of the most famous definitions is attributed, I want to say, to Dion Fortune. And I could be wrong. It's like one of those things where there's that, and everyone says it's a niacin. We're like, the pull to be a bud, or then the day came that being a bud was too painful. And it actually, because I was going to use it in my book, or maybe did use it in one of my books, it wasn't an ISNN, it was like misattribution. So I'm just saying it might be Dion Fortune, but it could be someone else, and it probably certainly is. Magic is the art of changing consciousness at will. And that gives us a very broad definition that we can go as deep or not. Magic is the art of changing consciousness at will. Magic is being able to direct your energy and your actions in alignment with your intentions and all aspects and levels of your consciousness. For me, it's about getting the subconscious on board. It's about getting the conscious self on board, the inner child, the teenage self, the future self. It's like stacking all of those elements in alignment with intuition and intention. So it's really difficult. That's like very hard. Like, I don't know if you've ever tried that, but it's not easy. It sounds very simple, but there are very few moments even in the day that I find myself like all on board. Usually there's like my inner child's like, but I want to go out and play. And my inner teen is like, you said you do this, or like, I want to do this. And then my conscious is like, I want to do this thing. And my subconscious says, but I'm scared, and that, like, so being in the present moment, like there's a reason why many spiritual traditions is like now. It's now. Be here now. It's actually very difficult.
Agreed. I think it's super difficult. No, I think that this definition of this sort of more expansive definition of magic is really important to kind of revisit, at least for me, because I agree with it. And this is something that I feel like also is a reality and not like a metaphysical, something outside one's perception, I guess, if I'm saying that correctly. I wanted to sort of go back to, because we're almost out of time, really briefly about how you end the book with a love letter to the moon. And I was just kind of curious about how you made that choice to end on that note of love. And yeah, if you could kind of just take us home for a couple more minutes.
Yeah, I love love. I want to make work about what I love. I want to give love and compassion like freely, as much as I can. So I wrote the book so long ago. I wrote it in like 2019 and finished it in like spring of 2020. I don't know exactly why I decided, but hey, let's end on a high note, right? Like, why not? So I think it's really important for us to orient ourselves around the heart and around love and around love in a proactive way, because I feel like so many of us, if we're not careful, can be, and again, myself included, right? I'm not taking myself out of this equation at all. We can react to things, we can react to things. And I don't want to live a life where I am in defense or reacting against. I want to live a life where I'm proactively orienting towards what is important to me, and I have to be careful. Like, that's similar to the whole like be here now. I have to be very careful that I'm not on autopilot, that I'm not just like reacting to something, some perceived slight, some whatever, and that I can move forward like in love. So I just think, like, when in doubt, literally choose love and be proactive with love, however that looks like to you, in action and in words. So I think people should definitely write love letters more often. I think people should definitely tell each other that they love each other more often. And one little personal story I'll share before we close about that, now that just popped up, is the moon in the book so much for me was this like love letter to the queer feminine, because I'm queer and I'm feminine, and the moon really to me connects a lot with that, as well as our mothers and our grandmothers, and you know, the moon doesn't have a gender, and also for me there's like that strong feminine tie. And my mother told me once that, like, for a really long time my grandmother would always tell me that she loved me, but my grandmother wouldn't tell my mother that she loved her. And so I started kind of making them tell each other that they loved each other, you know, and because that's so important. But it was really hard. Like, it was like really hard to say those words. So also, if you're listening to this and you're like, I could never tell someone I love them, like, you know, maybe write a love letter. Maybe your love letter looks like a bouquet of flowers. Maybe your love letter looks like taking out the trash because they've had a long day and they're tired. Maybe your love letter looks like calling your congress people, or like giving someone else a parking spot, or like letting someone go ahead of you in traffic. Like, there's many ways to express love, and we just have to find what those ways are for ourselves and allow that to be something that we can like stretch out into.
Sarah, thank you so much for doing this with me and meeting me. And there's so much in all of, so much reassurance, and some it taps into this like deep truth that I feel and I don't have words for. So thank you for giving light to that. And for
It was
all
a
of the time.
pleasure and an honor. Yeah, and you'll have to come on the pod. So we will talk more and more.
I will email you immediately.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for having me.
Sarah, thank you. Bye.
Bye.